We often think of our DNA as this incredibly complex, maybe even messy, instruction manual for life, shaped by eons of evolution. But what if I told you there might be something else going on? A hidden layer of order, a deep, almost musical, mathematical structure humming just beneath the surface. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty radical idea that suggests just that.
So, let's just put the question right out there. What if our genetic code isn't just a product of random mutations and natural selection? What if it's built on a numerical foundation so precise, so elegant, that it almost feels designed? That's the provocative idea we're going to unpack in this explainer.
So where does this wild idea come from? Well, our guide for this journey is a 2013 paper by Jean-Claude Perez. And it makes this absolutely extraordinary claim that the whole sequence of human DNA is actually unified by a global numerical structure. Now, our job here isn't to prove or disprove it, but to walk you through what the paper found. So let's take a look at the evidence it lays out.
Okay, so if you're going to go looking for a hidden code, you have to know where to start, right? The author of this paper didn't start with genes or chromosomes. No, they went for something way more basic.
It all starts with something called codon populations. Now, the best way to think about this is to imagine the entire human genome as a gigantic book with billions of letters. The analysis is actually pretty simple. It's just counting every single three-letter word or codon throughout the entire book. You've got 64 of these possible words, from AAA all the way to GGG. So the question is, how many times does each one show up? And the answer to that simple question, well, that's where things start to get really weird.
Now, when you take all those counts and you start to organize them, you'd probably expect a pretty random mess, right? A smooth curve maybe, but nothing special. But that is not what this paper claims to have found. Not even close. Instead, it seems to have uncovered some really strange, really precise symmetry.
Okay, so check this out. When you rank all 64 codons by how often they pop up in the genome, you get this chart from the paper. And it's not a smooth curve at all. Instead, they just line up in pairs. The most common and the second most common codons have almost the exact same count. Same for the third and fourth, the fifth and sixth, all the way down the list. This perfect pairing is the first major clue that something unusual is going on.
And this isn't just some numerical coincidence. The paper shows there's a really precise mathematical relationship here. One codon in the pair is what's called the reverse complement of the other. Let's just walk through that real quick. Say you have the codon TCG. First, you just reverse it. That gives you GCT. Then, you swap the letters for their chemical partners. A always goes with T, and C always goes with G. So GCT becomes CGA. And boom, that's its partner. This mathematical mirror links every single one of those pairs.
So we have this perfect, almost beautiful pairing. But believe it or not, that's just the first layer of the onion. The next layer of this whole mystery is all about this number, 2.
All right, so here's the next big reveal from the paper's analysis. If you take the 32 most common codons, basically the top half of that list we just saw, and you add up all of their counts, that grand total is almost exactly double the total count of the 32 least common codons. The whole genome split perfectly into a 2-to-1 ratio.
And this is just a brilliant way to visualize that finding. The author shows this split, the top half versus the bottom half, and that 2-to-1 relationship between them. And the resulting graphic, well, as the paper points out, it looks a whole lot like the universal peace symbol, almost like a symbolic representation of this deep numerical balance at the heart of our DNA.
These symmetries are already pretty fascinating on their own, right? But the paper argues that they're really just symptoms of a much deeper code, a system the author calls the 3 genomic numbers.
The first of these genomic numbers is 1. This represents that perfect pairing we just saw, that mirror codon symmetry. For every single codon, there is one, and only one, reverse complement partner, a perfect 1-to-1 relationship.
The second number is 2, and of course, you've already met this one. This stands for that perfect 2-to-1 frequency ratio that splits the entire genome, the 32 most common codons versus the 32 least common.
And then there's the third number. And this is where it gets absolutely mind-bending. It's phi, the golden ratio. You know that famous number, about 1.618, that just seems to show up everywhere in nature? From seashells to spiral galaxies to art and architecture. But what on earth is it doing here, deep inside our own DNA?
So here it is. This is the absolute core claim of the paper. These three numbers, 1, 2, and 5, they aren't just a few interesting patterns. The author claims they form a complete system, a kind of mathematical toolkit that can be used to model the entire frequency distribution of all 64 codons with an accuracy of over 99.99%. It's like a simple three-number key that unlocks the genome's entire numerical architecture.
And get this, apparently this isn't just some weird quirk of human DNA. The paper's analysis of other species finds that they each have their own unique set of 3 genomic numbers. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, actually share the exact same set as us, 1, 2, and 5. But a simple plant, for example, has a different set, though it's still built using the golden ratio, 5.
So this discovery of a three-numbered system for different species leaves the author to ask an even bigger, more profound question. Is it possible that there's a single, universal constant that governs all of life?
And the paper proposes that there is such a constant. Now, the math here gets a little complex, but it all boils down to this one specific value derived from phi. You take 3, subtract phi, and divide the result by 2. This number, which comes out to about 0.691, is argued to be a fundamental balancing point within the codon populations of the human genome.
And okay, this right here is the big wow moment from the paper. It puts two completely different worlds side by side. On one side, you have biology. A key ratio in the human genome, the balance between its different building blocks, is claimed to equal this very specific constant. On the other side, you have pure mathematics. The paper points out this bizarre property. A sphere with a volume of exactly 3 minus phi happens to have a radius of, you guessed it, 3 minus phi divided by 2. The exact same number. Is that just a wild cosmic coincidence, or is it a clue to some much deeper connection between math and life? This whole idea of a universal mathematical constant, it leads to the paper's final, and maybe its most profound idea. It suggests that this entire mathematical structure isn't just some neat feature. It might actually redefine our very concept of what information in our DNA even is.
To really get your head around this, think about the famous art of M.C. Escher. In his work, the subject, what he called the form, and the background or substance are totally inseparable. They literally define each other. The author of this paper proposes that a similar duality exists across the entire genome, a whole new layer of information hiding in plain sight.
So how do you even find something like that? Well, the paper proposes a totally new way of looking at the data. Instead of that long list we saw before, the 64 codons are reorganized into a simple 8x8 grid. Then, the population counts for each of these 8 rows, which the paper calls octaves, are all added up to see if a new kind of pattern emerges.
And what it reveals is one last, stunning pattern. The analysis shows that these 8 octaves seem to naturally split into 2 groups. 3 of them appear to carry the core information, the form. The other 5 seem to be redundant echoes of that information, the substance. And this split between the 2 groups closely mirrors the golden ratio. And get this, it's a split between 3 octaves and 5 octaves out of a total of 8. 3, 5, 8. Those are consecutive numbers in the famous Fibonacci sequence.
So all of this leaves us with this final, massive, thought-provoking question that the paper seems to be asking. We tend to think of biology as messy, organic, shaped by unpredictable forces. But if these findings are right, could it be that underneath all that beautiful complexity, life itself is built on a framework of pure, elegant mathematics? What other secrets might be written in the code?